What's up, YouTube? Today we're gonna malt some corn. I feel like we did this before. Deja vu.
Deja vu.
I just said, yes, man, right away, anything.
Today we're gonna be malting corn with robots.
Please put down your weapon. You have 20 seconds to comply.
My robot most likely won't kill you. Probably. Before any of you say that I am full of crap, no, I really did build a robot. If you look at the simplest definition of a robot, which is a machine that can be programmed to automatically perform specific tasks. What I have here is a machine that can be programmed to perform a very specific task, and that task is simply rolling my malt at specific intervals for specific durations. You might be asking yourself, hey, why would I want to do something like that? Well, the simple answer is I'm lazy, and malting corn can be a very tedious process, and you really kind of have to pay attention to it if you're doing it in the traditional way using, like a large pan like I did in the last video. And if you haven't seen the last video, check the link up in the description. That'll give you a little bit more detail than I'm going to go into today, because today is all about the robot. The other reason that I built it is because I messed up 10 pounds of corn because I forgot about it for a couple of days, and it molded and turned all gross and nasty, and it smelled like corn and dog poop, which you don't really want that. It's not a good flavor. But I've got a buddy of mine, Jesse. He's down in New Zealand, and he runs a distilling channel here on YouTube. I'll put the link up here in the top for you. He does all kinds of distilling, but he hasn't had a chance to do a corn whiskey, so I'm making 10 pounds of malted corn so that I can send it to him, and hopefully he'll be able to make use of it. I think he can. But if you want to know anything about distilling, check out his channel. And speaking of Jesse's videos on distilling, they're really in-depth, and there's a lot of information there. If you want a little bit more of a condensed capsuled view, then check out Flavor Lab. He's doing a corn whiskey series, so I'll put a link to that right up here. And I recommend you go check it out, because it's like 6.5 minutes long, and it gives you a really clear explanation of how to do your own distilling. Okay, so here's one of the great things about building this malt roller. I did 5 pounds of corn in the last video, and that ended up being a lot for those 2 little pans. This one, I did 10 pounds of corn, and it's having no problem at all handling 10 pounds of corn. Now basically, I looked at TL Grimmy's video on YouTube. I'll put a link for him down in the description. He built a malt roller for his barley malt for his home brewing, and it was a really good design, but he had mentioned there were a couple of things that he wanted to change. So I looked at some videos of some rock tumblers, because it's basically the same process. And then I made some modifications. So here's what we ended up with. Okay, so as you can see, this is not a fast process. I have this thing on a barbecue rotisserie motor, and it's a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket that I used a hole saw and drilled a hole in here and a hole in the backside. The hole in the backside here, I just hot glued this screen on. This lets air flow through the whole chamber to keep mold and anything like that from propagating. On this front side, I did the same thing, but I did it with Velcro so that I can get in here and spray it with a little H2 flow.
Think of H2 Flow as an app for your teeth.
So that's the main chamber, but the modifications I made to this, I got 3 of these 1.5-inch casters. This one is just a catch. It's just a safety. If the bucket tries to jump off and roll sideways, which it tried one time when it was empty, so I thought I might as well go ahead and put that on there. It'll run into that and then flop back down onto the wheels. These are 2-inch casters that have a nice soft rubber on them. I drilled them out, glued them onto this shaft with some 2-part epoxy, and let them dry. And I just have these from center axle to center axle. These are 8 inches apart. And from the top of this wheel to the top of this wheel, it's about a 2-inch drop. And you need that drop so that the bucket, most of the weight, sits on these wheels. And this is mainly to guide it. And if the bucket starts to move back and forth, you don't want it to run into the side and get locked up. So I have these little furniture slidey things tapped in at the front and the back. And then on the back side, every once in a while this shaft will try to slide forward and pop out of the motor. So I went with the really high-tech solution of taking this little piece of metal and putting a couple of screws in just to hold it in place. Easy solution, cost me about 35 cents worth of metal, and I already had the screws. So the one thing that you definitely need, you can't do this project without, is some of this JB weld. Now this is the one that I use, the quick weld, because it goes together pretty fast. The reason why you need that is because the shaft of the barbecue rotisserie, it actually screws together in pieces. And the problem is that you're putting so much weight on top of that shaft that it can actually unscrew, because when the motor clicks off and on, it'll change direction. So one time it'll be going clockwise, the next time it'll be going counterclockwise. So you need that 2-part epoxy to basically lock that shaft together. And here's what I'm talking about. This shaft screws into this shaft. So I just put some of the epoxy on the threads and then tightened it up and let it cure for about 6 hours, and it was done. And there's another seam right in here that's a little harder to see. Did the same exact thing on that one. That way this effectively becomes one piece of steel. It's not going to come undone. Not with the 10 pounds that you're going to put on it with the grain. The other thing you need, other than the rotisserie motor and the casters, is a lamp timer. You need to make sure it's a grounded timer, has the 3 holes. Otherwise the motor for the rotisserie won't actually plug into it. I just set my timer to go off 6 times. You can go more than 6 times, but no less than 6 times.
Viewer. What?
So, what are the advantages of this? One, you're very unlikely to have an infection of either mold or bacteria. Because the grain is constantly tumbling, or tumbling at least 6 times a day, the airflow gets through there and it prevents mold and it prevents bacteria from building up. It also, by rotating around and letting all that airflow go through, it dissipates any heat that builds up in the grain bed, which, you know, keeps it from being a super happy environment for bacteria and mold. So you come by 3 or 4 times a day and spray it with some water, and that's it. You don't have to turn it by hand. And the other thing about turning it by hand, if your hands aren't super clean, then you're just infecting the grain bed. So this prevents you from doing that, because the only thing that's going in there is the spray water. One of the things that I changed as far as the modification on this was the type of motor. I'm using a barbecue rotisserie motor because it goes slow enough that the corn, even when it starts getting all those really long roots and shoots on it, it's not going to get damaged, because it goes so slow that, you know, the tumbling action in there is not enough to actually hurt anything. I have some wooden baffles that I screwed into the bucket, so it acts like the inside of a clothing dryer. And they're just slats of wood with 3 screws in them, no biggie. Oh, one thing to keep in mind is that I'm sure there is an upper limit to the amount of weight that you can put in that bucket. I started with 10 pounds dry, 10 pounds of dry corn. Once it was soaked and I tossed it in there, it was probably closer to 15 or 20 pounds, and that motor has not had any problem with it at all. The one thing I'll mention though is when I put that corn in there, it only came up to about here. Now the screen is perfectly strong enough, and the Velcro around it is strong enough to hold that in. That's not the problem. But you can see from there all the way up to about here now, once the roots start growing, the bulk of this, the volume really increases. I've got at least another 24 to 36 hours to let this go. My only concern is that this is going to get completely full with all that grain. So we'll see how it turns out. Once this is finished sprouting, then I'll cut to the drying part, and then we'll ship it off to Jesse. Alright, it looks like we are just about done. I'll show you the sprouted stuff right now. And you'll notice, now that it's fully sprouted, It is probably up to about here. So it really did bulk up a lot with all the root volume and the sprout volume. So because of that, I think 10 pounds is about all we can do in one of these 5-gallon buckets. So while the corn's on that drying rack, you want to make sure that you stir it around every few hours like this. And you can see here that it's probably about 50% dry. There's still some shoots, but a lot of the roots are starting to dry up nicely. All right, so the malting is done. Here's what it looks like when it comes out of the dryer, and you have to shake off all of the busted off roots and shoots. I'm just using video from my previous video because it's exactly the same process. If you figure out an easier way to do that, let me know in the comments section because I'd love to find a faster way to do that too. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to know more about malting, stay tuned. Hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon right next to it so you can get notified when I post new content, because I'm going to do some more interesting malt stuff with the robot. Oh, and if you want to build one of these malt tumblers, I've got an Amazon link down in the description for the barbecue rotisserie that I used. If you have any questions about the roller, about malting, feel free to ask them down in the comment section. If you want to know more about distilling, click on this link right now. You'll be able to watch Jesse's video. He's going to do something awesome. I don't know what he's going to do, but it's going to be awesome. Mainly because it's distilling, and that's illegal here, but legal for him over there. So, yeah, I've got a long rant about the legalization of distilling in the United States, so if you'd like to check that out, link right up here. So thanks for watching, and hope you build your own robot. Talk at you later.